Andrew Tate just made a massive mistake by going after UFC featherweight champion ILIaTopuria wife. And let me tell you, the internet is losing its mind. Topuria is not having it, and the entire fighting community has come together to put Tate in his place. This is getting ugly. But wait, there's more. Bryce Mitchell is getting absolutely destroyed online right now for some wild comments he made, and the backlash is hitting him hard from all directions. Sponsors are paying attention, fans are divided, and this controversy just keeps getting bigger. Plus, and we've got some actually positive news involving the scariest man on the planet. Alex Pereira and Dana White has some interesting things to say about his future. This video is packed with drama, controversy, and breaking news that you absolutely need to know about. Alright, let's start with the biggest controversy that's got everyone fired up. Andrew Tate, the former kickboxer turned internet personality who's never been shy about stirring up drama, recently found himself in a heated back and forth involving UFC featherweight champion IliaTopuria's wife. Now, for those who don't know, IliaTopuria is the current UFC featherweight champion who knocked out Alexander Volkanovski and then Max Holloway in back-to-back fights. The guy is an absolute beast in the octagon, representing Georgia and Spain, and he's been on an incredible winning streak. But this situation has nothing to do with his fighting skills. So here's what went down. Andrew Tate made some comments on social media that were perceived as disrespectful toward Topuria's wife. Tate, who's built his entire online presence around controversial takes on masculinity, relationships, and wealth, apparently crossed a line that Topuria wasn't going to let slide. The exact nature of Tate's comments sparked immediate outrage. We're talking about a guy who's already been banned from multiple social media platforms in the past for his views on women and relationships. Tate's whole brand is built on making provocative statements that get people talking, but going after a fighter's wife. That's a different level entirely. IliaTopuria didn't take long to respond. The champion made it crystal clear that disrespecting his family is not something he's going to tolerate. Topuria fired back on social media, defending his wife and calling out Tate for crossing boundaries. The Georgian-Spanish fighter has always been known for his confidence and willingness to speak his mind, and he certainly didn't hold back here. What makes this situation even more interesting is the contrast between these two personalities. On one side, you've got Andrew Tate, someone who's made millions by cultivating a controversial online persona, someone who thrives on attention, whether it's positive or negative. On the other side, you've got IliaTopuria, a legitimate world champion fighter who's earned respect through actual combat, not just talking on the internet. The MMA community has been overwhelmingly supportive of Topuria in this situation. Fans and fellow fighters alike have been backing the champion, with many pointing out that there's a huge difference between trash talk related to fighting and bringing someone's family into the mix. That's traditionally been seen as off-limits in combat sports, even during the most heated rivalries. Several high-profile fighters have weighed in on the controversy. Many have pointed out that while trash talk is part of the fight game, there are lines you don't cross, and family is definitely one of them. Some fighters have even challenged Tate directly, suggesting that if he wants to talk tough, he should step into the octagon himself, rather than hiding behind his keyboard. The backlash against Tate has been swift and severe. Even people who might normally enjoy his content or find his business advice valuable have criticized him for this particular incident. When you're going after a fighter's wife, you're not just attacking the fighter anymore. You're attacking his entire family, and that's universally seen as crossing a major line. What's particularly frustrating for many people is that this isn't the first time Tate has courted controversy. His history includes ongoing legal issues in Romania, previous bans from social media platforms, and countless controversial statements about women and relationships. But this specific incident with Topuria's wife has united the MMA community against him in a way that few other controversies have. Topuria, for his part, has handled the situation with the kind of controlled aggression you'd expect from a champion. He's made his position clear, defended his family, and shown that he's not someone to be messed with. either in the cage or out of it. The champion has millions of fans who respect him not just for his fighting ability, but for his principles and the way he carries himself. Now let's shift gears to another major controversy rocking the MMA world. Bryce Mitchell, the UFC featherweight fighter known for his country boy persona and his twister submission finish over Matt Sales back in 2018, is facing heavy backlash for his recent controversial statements. Bryce Mitchell has always been an interesting character in the UFC. The Arkansas native is known for his unique personality, his strong religious beliefs, and his willingness to share unconventional opinions. He's the kind of fighter who doesn't filter himself, which has won him both dedicated fans and plenty of critics over the years. The current backlash stems from comments Mitchell made about various social and political topics during recent interviews and social media posts. Without getting too deep into the specific political details, Mitchell expressed views that a significant portion of the MMA fan base and the general public found offensive or misinformed. What's happening here is a pattern we've seen before with Mitchell. He's made controversial statements in the past about conspiracy theories, flat earth beliefs, and various political topics. But this latest round of comments has brought the backlash to a whole new level. Major MMA media outlets have been covering the story extensively. Journalists and analysts who cover the sport have been discussing whether fighters should face consequences for their personal views expressed outside of competition. It's a complex issue because, on one hand, fighters are independent contractors with First Amendment rights. On the other hand, they represent the UFC brand, and their sponsors also have to consider whether they want to be associated with controversial statements. Several of Mitchell's fellow fighters have publicly disagreed with his comments. Some have done so respectfully, simply stating that they see things differently. Others have been more direct in their criticism, calling out specific statements as harmful or dangerous. The UFC itself has been in a tricky position with Mitchell. The organization has historically been relatively hands-off when it comes to fighters' personal opinions, as long as they're not breaking any laws or violating specific contract terms. Dana White has repeatedly stated that fighters are entitled to their opinions, even when he personally disagrees with them. But sponsors are a different story. In today's climate, brands are extremely careful about who they associate with, and controversial statements can lead to sponsors pulling out. For a fighter like Mitchell, who isn't a massive pay-per-view draw, losing sponsorship money could be a significant financial hit. What makes the Mitchell situation particularly interesting is that he seems genuinely confused by the backlash. In his mind, he's just sharing his honest beliefs and exercising his freedom of speech. But critics argue that freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences, and that public figures need to be more thoughtful about the platforms they have and the influence they wield. The debate around Mitchell has sparked larger conversations about what responsibility, if any, athletes have when it comes to their public statements. Some argue that we should separate the athlete from their personal views, that Mitchell's performance in the octagon should be the only thing that matters. Others contend that in the age of social media, athletes are role models whether they want to be or not, and their statements carry weight beyond their individual right to free expression. Fan reactions have been split. Mitchell's core supporters have rallied around him, arguing that he's being unfairly targeted for having different opinions. They see the backlash as an example of cancel culture gone too far. Meanwhile, critics argue that there's a difference between having different political opinions and spreading what they consider to be harmful misinformation. Looking at Mitchell's fighting career, he's currently ranked in the UFC featherweight division and has shown real skills inside the octagon. He's got a solid ground game, respectable striking, and he's always game to fight. But these controversies threaten to overshadow his athletic achievements, which is something that has to be frustrating for him regardless of where you stand on his statements. Finally, let's talk about some news involving one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC right now, and the organization's president. Alex Pereira and Dana White have been making headlines, and the news is actually pretty positive compared to the drama we've been discussing. Alex Pereira, for those new to the sport, is an absolute phenomenon. The Brazilian kickboxing legend transitioned to MMA and has become one of the most feared strikers in the entire UFC. He's a former middleweight champion who moved up to light heavyweight and captured that title as well. The guy has knockout power in both hands that is genuinely terrifying, and he's become a massive fan favorite. Recent reports and statements from Dana White have indicated that Pereira is in line for some major opportunities moving forward. White has been extremely complimentary of Pereira in recent press conferences and interviews, praising not just his fighting ability, but his willingness to take on any challenge. What makes Pereira special isn't just his power, it's his attitude. The man fights frequently, takes on all comers, and never makes excuses. In an era where champions sometimes try to pick and choose their opponents or hold out for money fights, Pereira has been refreshingly old school. If the UFC wants him to fight, he shows up and does his job. Dana White loves fighters like this. The UFC president has repeatedly said that Pereira is one of his favorite fighters to work with because he's a professional who understands the fight business. When you're easy to work with and you deliver exciting performances, that's how you get opportunities and favorable treatment from the promotion. There's been speculation about Pereira potentially moving up to heavyweight to challenge for a third championship in a third weight class. While nothing is confirmed, both Pereira and his team have indicated openness to the idea. Dana White has also hinted that if Pereira wants to make that move, the UFC would be interested in making it happen. The relationship between Pereira and Dana appears to be excellent from a business standpoint. Pereira brings excitement, rarely gets injured, and his fights almost always deliver. For the UFC, he's a dream fighter to promote because you can count on him to show up, put on a show, and generate pay-per-view buys. What's also notable is how Pereira has become a crossover star. His highlight reel knockouts get millions of views on social media, and he's gained fans even among casual viewers who might not follow MMA closely. That kind of appeal is exactly what the UFC wants in their champions. In contrast to the controversies surrounding Tate, Topuria, and Mitchell, the Pereira-Dana relationship represents the positive side of MMA. It's about mutual respect, professionalism, and putting on great fights for the fans. Pereira has shown that you can be a massive star in this sport without resorting to crossing lines or making controversial statements that have nothing to do with fighting. The potential future matchups for Pereira are incredibly exciting. Whether he stays at light heavyweight to defend his title, moves up to heavyweight to chase history, or even drops back down to middleweight for super fights, there are compelling options everywhere you look. And based on Dana White's comments, the UFC is ready to support whatever Pereira wants to do next. What do you think about these situations? Do you think Tate went too far? How should the UFC handle fighters who make controversial statements? And what do you want to see next from Alex Pereira? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the latest MMA drama and news, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more combat sports content. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video,